Hello, and welcome to the very first live stream of The Future is Socialist. I'm your host, Emberlea McCulligh, and I'll be going live every Wednesday for this stream at 1 o'clock. I had some issues with sound, so if somebody could come into the chat and let me know if you can hear me, I'm going to post in chat. I had some audio issues earlier, so I don't know if I've resolved them. So hopefully someone will come and let me know if they can hear me. Or I can look on my YouTube app to find out. Let's see. Is the sound going through? I'm not even seeing anything on the screen. Here we go, this one. Okay, now I have sound. All right, so we'll get started with the show then. Today we're going to talk about, on the very first episode, we're going to talk about the PRO Act. We're going to talk about a little bit about the stimulus bill, and we're going to talk about Amazon's anti-union tactics today. All right. So first we're going to talk about the PRO Act. All right. Let me back up because I did another live stream earlier and no one could hear me. So here we go. House passes sweeping pro-union bill that would reform labor laws. In a win for the labor movement, the House on Tuesday passed legislation that would reform labor laws and give workers more power to organize after decades of setbacks to unions. The Protecting the Right to Organize Act, also known as the PRO Act, was previously passed by the House in early 2020, but the Senate, then under Republican control, failed to take it up. The House passed it again Tuesday with a vote of 225 to 206, largely along party lines. 5 Republicans voted for the bill and 1 Democrat opposed the PRO Act. The bill includes provisions to expand the definition of employee for the purpose of allowing independent contractors to join unions, up in so-called right to work laws by allowing bargaining agreements to require dues by all employees represented by the agreements and prohibit certain anti-union actions by employers and retaliation toward workers who participate in organizing. Right to work laws say employees can't be forced to join a union or pay dues and are favored by businesses who say the measures boost employment and worker income. But organized labor groups say they favor big business and inhibit workers' rights to collectively bargain. Strong unions lead to better pay, higher quality, and more affordable healthcare, more secure retirement benefits, and workplaces that are safer, not just for union members, but for all workers. Excuse me. House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, Democrat of Maryland, said on the House floor. Unfortunately, in the 21st century, the right to organize has been eroded and weakened. As a result, many workers are stuck with no recourse to demand the better pay and benefits they deserve, or they are subject to poor working conditions that are harmful to their health and safety, he said. And we know who he's pointing out specifically on the right to work. The poor working conditions that are harmful to health and safety of the employees. I think he's directly attacking Amazon or indirectly attacking Amazon for that. He says in a tweet from POTUS, I believe every worker deserves a free and fair choice to join a union, and the PRO Act will bring us closer to that reality. I urge Congress to send it to my desk so we can summon a new wave of worker power and create an economy that works for everyone. Well, we'll see if this bill actually gets passed. The most exciting part of this bill is coming up. The bill would also give the National Labor Relations Board the ability to fine and penalize companies that do not comply with fair labor practices. It could also open the door for contractors at companies like Uber and Lyft to collectively organize. This is really important because we need independent contractors to be legitimately recognized as employees so that companies like Uber and Lyft can't steal their money anymore. You do realize that Uber and Lyft steal from their employees, as well as DoorDash and any of these other companies that use so-called independent contractors or in colloquial gig workers. The bill was supported by labor groups such as the AFL-CIO, who view it as the most significant worker empowerment legislation since the Great Depression. Leninism, the associate director at the Kalmanovitz Initiative for Labor and the Working Poor at Georgetown University, said that the PRO Act would rectify employers' ability to skirt long-standing labor laws. A former organizer with a clothing and textiles union working across the South, Wyndham said that the bill's provisions to stop employers from holding captive audience meetings where they coerce or require workers to sit through meetings to discourage organizing is particularly important. Now, I have a little anecdote I'd like to talk to you about. I used to work for a large discount clothing company. They're ubiquitous across the US. And I worked both in one in Georgia and one here in California. The main difference between my employment kind of come on board employment training was in Georgia, which is a right to work state because it is technically a red state. I had to sit through a video that was anti-union organizing. But in California, I didn't have to because California provides more cover for employees and they don't outright support the right to work laws. So this is a good thing. And we need right to work to end. So the PRO Act would finally give workers the right to organize and form unions that they're supposed to have had under law for years and years, but that employers have routinely stripped them of because employers have broken and bent labor law to such an extent that the current labor law is virtually meaningless, she told USA Today, Wyndham. President Joe Biden put out a statement Tuesday voicing his support. The president said more empowerment of workers is necessary as the nation recovers from the COVID-19 pandemic, which hit workers hard. He previously promised to be the nation's most pro-union president. The middle class built this country and unions built the middle class. Unions lift up workers, both union and non-union. They are critical to strengthening our economic competitiveness, Biden said. Okay, I have a little issue with saying that the middle class built this country. Unions did build the middle class. I will give the unions the credit for that because they did. But the middle class did not build this country. No. Working poor and slaves actually built this country. Mr. Biden, President Biden, needs to get his facts straight because the middle class did not build this country. On February 28th, he expressed support for Amazon warehouse workers' push to unionize in Alabama. This is an amazing thing, and I hope that the union goes through. Without explicitly naming Amazon or saying how workers should vote. There should be no intimidation, no coercion, no threats, no anti-union propaganda, Biden said in a video posted on Twitter. And I can agree with that completely. As an organizer who spent 2 decades fighting for working people alongside unions, I am proud to be a lead sponsor of the PRO Act. Workers have carried us through this pandemic, and it's long overdue that we put power back into their hands, Rep. Pramila Jayapal, Democrat of Washington, said. The bill now faces what is likely to be staunch opposition from Republicans in the Senate. Representative Virginia Foxx, a Republican from North Carolina, the GOP leader of the House Committee on Education and Labor, argued on the House floor that the bill would take away the freedoms of entrepreneurs and individual workers whom she argued built the middle class in America rather than unions. She's wrong. She said individuals strapped by the COVID economy are taking advantage of the ability to work as independent contractors. No one is taking advantage of being an independent contractor. They're forced into being independent contractors by companies like Uber and Lyft and DoorDash. Companies like this. They are trying to skirt and curtail employment laws. They are stealing from their employees. This is widely known. Everybody knows that, especially Uber. Uber's particularly bad. It is unconscionable that Democrats would consider a bill that would take millions from workers' paychecks, cost employers an estimated $47 billion in new annual cost, infringe on workers' First Amendment rights, and put small businesses at further risk by closing their doors, Foxx said in a call with opponents of the bill on Monday. You know what? This woman does not know what she's talking about. Representative Virginia Foxx. She has no idea what she's talking about. It is not unconscionable that Democrats or left-leaning people want a bill that protects worker rights not employer rights. She is for employer rights, just like every Republican out there. All the Republicans, all the Republicans, all the parties, all the PACs, they want you to be oppressed by your employer. That's what they want. They want employers to have all the rights and you, as the worker, to have none. So, what do you think you should do? Should we go in and, through electoral politics, vote out these people? Congress people only have 2 years in before they can be voted out. It's time to start getting some better people in there, like Pramila Jayapal, AOC, Ilhan Omar, Cori Bush. Come on. Cori Bush is lighting it up on fire in Congress. Did you see the speech she made last week? Absolutely amazing. Just beautiful. She's just an amazing and beautiful human being who worked her butt off to get where she is. She is not like this Virginia Foxx who probably didn't have to work very hard to get into Congress, but she did. Cori Bush did. She worked really hard. AOC worked really, really hard. Ilhan Omar, she worked really hard. They worked really hard to get in there. Representative Tim Ryan, a Democrat from Ohio, slammed Republicans who opposed the bill in a House floor speech, urging them to focus on supporting workers rather than cultural issues such as the controversy of certain Dr. Seuss books being deemed insensitive. Stop talking about Dr. Seuss and start working with us on behalf of the American workers, Ryan said. Here's his speech. Oop, there's no volume. Okay, so sorry about that. I'll have to work out the kinks as I can because I am new to this live streaming thing. But I'm glad that I have one viewer. Hello, how are you? Be sure to go join the live chat, okay? So now we're going to talk about the stimulus bill. And this article comes from Jacobin Magazine, written by Matt Brunig. The stimulus bill is a step toward aggressively fighting poverty. The House just passed a stimulus bill that breaks the 25-year bipartisan consensus that the very poor shouldn't be eligible for cash benefits. It's a watershed moment, and we should build on it by turning the U.S. welfare state into a poverty-fighting machine. The third big round of coronavirus legislation passed the House this afternoon and is headed for Joe Biden's desk. Like the two prior rounds, this legislation provided much-needed cash payments to households, primarily through per-person payments administered by the IRS and a bonus payment for individuals receiving unemployment insurance. The bill also put more money into the Coronavirus Relief Fund established by the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security CARES Act, which provides fiscal support to state and local governments. In addition to re-upping these measures, the newest bill made one-year modifications to the nation's tax credit programs, most predominantly the child tax credit and the earned income tax credit. As a fraction of total spending in the bill, the changes to these programs were relatively small, but insofar as they point toward where the U.S. welfare state might be headed, they are arguably the most significant. The reforms. The EITC was reformed as follows. The maximum benefit for the childless EITC was increased from $543 to $1,500. Eligibility for the EITC was expanded from ages 25 to 64 to ages 19 and above. The CTC was reformed as follows. The maximum benefit was increased from $2,000 per child to $3,600 for children below the age of 6 and $3,000 for children ages 6 and above. The CTC benefit phase-in, which excluded the poorest children from the benefit, was eliminated. These reforms contain a major ideological watershed. In eliminating the CTC benefit phase-in, we finally overcame the 25-year bipartisan consensus that held that very poor people should not be eligible for cash benefits. Arguably, we overcame that consensus last year when the first two rounds of stimulus checks were available for the first time to the poorest Americans. But those checks did not get scanned in the political discourse as being a revolution in welfare state thinking, while the CTC reform, even though it is also just for 1 year, did get scanned that way. The ideological fight. Because it was scanned that way, we finally got to have the ideological debate that had mostly gone unspoken for the last quarter century. In that debate, folks like Orrin Cass, Scott Winship, Mickey Kaus, Marco Rubio and Mike Lee denounced the elimination of the CTC phase-in as the welfare boogeyman of the 1990s. But the announcements had no effect. The major liberal publications like the Washington Post, the New York Times, and the New Republic that egged on the brutal welfare cuts of the 1990s took the opposite position this time around. Even one Republican, Mitt Romney, shrugged off the concerns and offered his own alternative child benefit that would have provided even more money to the poorest children than the CTC reform that ultimately passed. Senator Ron Wyden summed up the general Democratic response to the anti-welfare critiques this time around, even among the most conservative Democratic legislators. It's unfortunate that Senate Republicans are It's unfortunate that Senate Republicans are using the same tired old tropes from the 1980s to argue against helping children whose parents are among the poorest Americans, said Senate Finance Chair Ron Wyden, Democrat from Oregon. This is about lifting children out of deep poverty. No parent would be able to live high on the hog because they get a few $1,000s per year to help feed, house, and clothe their children. The fact that we had this debate and the pro-welfare side won is something to be happy about. I've only been in the policy game for around 10 years, but even I know that until recently, non-phase-in cash benefits were seen as ridiculous and pointless, that it's a waste of time to even talk about them. Messy first steps. Although the ideological reversal is something to celebrate, it's also important to not lose sight of the fact that even the new tax credit regime is an indefensible mess. All of the critiques I made in 2017 against the precise design of the new CTC are still true. If we are going to eliminate the CTC phase-in, then we should take the benefit out of the tax system altogether and create a universal benefit administered by the Social Security Administration, something Mitt Romney proposed in response to the Biden bill, which was later endorsed by Foxx and the New York Times. The new CTC operates as a monthly advance payment of an annual benefit based on annual characteristics that cannot be known in advance. Needless to say, this design generates insane levels of complexity that were resolved in the final bill by creating an even more insanely complex safe harbor that only partially protects people who make errors in trying to navigate the complexity created by the design in the first place. The IRS is not set up to pay out monthly benefits, has relatively few customer-facing offices, and is detached from a large share of poor kids because those kids' families do not file taxes. Characterizing a non-phased-in monthly child allowance as a mere tweak of the existing CTC program was cute and perhaps even somewhat useful initially to get people's heads wrapped around the idea. But at some point, that framing device should have given away to good policy design. Sadly, it did not. As bad as the new CTC is, the new EITC is even worse. Many Democrats spoke eloquently about the injustices of phasing in the CTC, but then decided to go ahead and continue phasing in the EITC, despite the fact that EITC and CTC are basically the exact same benefit. As a result of this decision, the new tax credit regime continues to exclude the poorest kids from the majority of the nation's tax credit benefits. As we can see in the graph below, the poorest kids will only receive $3,000 from the tax credit system, while kids with incomes right around the poverty line will receive more than twice that amount, $6,618. If you think that it is wrong to phase in the child tax credit, then why isn't it also wrong to phase in the identically constructed earned income tax credit? If $6,618 is an appropriate level of benefit for a child right around the poverty line, then why isn't it also an appropriate level of benefit for the poorest children in the country? With racial justice all the rage, why are we keeping in place an EITC benefit that disproportionately excludes Black and Latino children because their parents are too poor to claim the full benefit amount? Many liberals reacted in moral horror at Scott Winship and Orrin Cass saying that we should continue to phase in the tax credit benefits. And yet Democrats actually have followed this morally horrific advice. Beyond the child aspects of the new EITC, the other weird expanding EITC coverage to people's ages 65 and older. This is not a huge thing in the grand scheme of things, but whereas the CTC represented an ideological watershed in the right direction, this represents an ideological watershed in the wrong direction. In prior periods, when faced with the reality that some elderly people lack sufficient income, we produced and then beefed up the Social Security and Supplemental Security income programs. Today, when faced with that same reality, we passed a wage subsidy for the elderly to encourage them to work more. Finishing the debate. The good news is that these tax credit reforms are all set to expire at the end of the year. There is a major appetite among Democrats to make them permanent. One hopes that this appetite is not literally constrained to making these exact credits in these exact forms permanent, but is rather an appetite for achieving the broad aims of these new credits in the best way possible. This means that everyone in the policy game, and especially the left, should start working now to stake out what they think the permanent version of these benefits should ideally look like. Rather than continuing on with these messy kludges, we have an opportunity to do it right. The ideological barriers have been overcome. And that was written by Matt Brunick, who is the founder of the People's Policy Project. So I'd like to see what you guys think about that in the chat. If there's anything you'd like me to cover, please let me know for the future programs, because I'm going to be going live, live streaming every Wednesday like this. Okay. And now we're going to look at another Jacobin piece. I think it was Jacobin. Let's see. Yes. From the 7th of March. Amazon's anti-union activities should all be illegal, by Gabrielle Semel. In the ongoing union drive in Bessemer, Alabama, Amazon is playing a massive role in influencing the outcome of the election. This should be a crime. Bosses should be legally prohibited from interfering with their workers' union organizing. The ongoing union vote by 5,800 Amazon workers in Bessemer, Alabama, has opened a window into the challenges workers face in unionizing. As the public is learning, the boss gets a big role in the process. It shouldn't be this way. As Amazon grew at meteoric rates in 2020, adding almost 500,000 new employees worldwide, as well as a $75 billion to the fortune of CEO Jeff Bezos, its workers began fighting for more equitable treatment. Some signed petitions demanding specific changes, such as paid sick leave and the end of rate-based write-ups. In Staten Island, workers walked off the job demanding the facility be sanitized. The Bessemer workers, fed up with the company's intense productivity quotas and relentless monitoring, including of their bathroom breaks, went a step further. They signed authorization cards with the retail, wholesale, and department store union, RWDSU, seeking to form a union. At least 30% of the workers at a specified facility need to sign such cards to get a vote for a union at the National Labor Relations Board, NLRB, the federal agency that administers labor law for private sector workers across the United States, which the PRO Act will strengthen and not weaken. So we need the PRO Act so that the National Labor Relations Board can do its job and fine Amazon when it does bad things to employees, or any company does bad things to their employees. Once the petition was filed, Amazon called in the union avoidance storm troopers. Ooh, let me read that again because that's quite a statement. Once the petition was filed, Amazon called in the union avoidance stormtroopers, hiring a law firm well-versed in keeping unions out. Their first task was to create legal issues to delay the actual vote, hoping to use the additional time to convince workers to vote against the union. The RWDSU had filed a petition with the labor board to represent a unit of 1,500 workers, mostly pickers and packers, at the Bessemer facility. Amazon's lawyers, using a well-worn employer tactic, countered that the lawful unit had to include all workers at the facility, including seasonal employees, approximately 5,800 workers in totals, about 4 times the number the union had petitioned for. This is a classic move by employers to skirt union building activities. It's a common one. And it should be illegal. Honestly, it should be, guys. Come on, let's get it together. Because the future is socialist. Excuse me. Under NLRB rules, a disagreement about who must be in the unit and an appropriate unit in NLRB speak requires a hearing. Hearings take time. Each job category is evaluated as to whether it is more or less like another job category. Is the job in the unit or out? The employer has all the records, which the union has to file subpoenas to get, leading to more fights and costing more time. To make matters worse, hearing days don't necessarily run consecutively. As a lawyer for the Communication Workers of America, I once did such a hearing that lasted for almost a year. Employers usually seek a bigger unit to buy time or scare off the union, but sometimes they try to dilute the pro-union vote by arguing that a job classification with a lot of union support should be out of the unit, or a job with little union support should be added. If the board agrees with the company on the larger or different unit, the union might not have enough cards to support the petition or will walk away because they can't win. Here's where the consultants move in. Even if the board ultimately sides with the union while the parties are fighting all of this out, another wing of the union avoidance machine moves in, the consultants, often called persuaders. Their job is to convince workers of any combination of the following. You don't need a union. You don't want a union. Unions can't help. Unions are costly. Unions are scary. Unions are corrupt. Unions don't care about you. You will end up on strike. You could get fired. And vote no. The more time the lawyers get, the more time the consultants have to hammer home their message. In this case, RWDSU stopped Amazon's attempt to drag things out by agreeing to the 5,800 worker unit. This ended the big stall, but it also makes victory for the workers in the union much more difficult. Nonetheless, the persuaders moved quickly. At Bessemer, they've plastered vote no signs everywhere, even in bathroom stalls. You go to the bathroom for privacy, one worker told labor reporter Stephen Greenhouse, but then you have a flyer right in your face. That feels like a type of harassment. Workers have been required to attend weekly anti-union meetings called captive audience meetings, where they are told how terrible unions are. Amazon created a special website for Bessemer workers. Wow, they went high tech and did a website. Woo-hoo! They must be really frightened if they are plastering flyers, anti-union flyers, even in bathrooms. Ugh. I don't go to the bathroom to read anti-union flyers. So Amazon created a special website for Bessemer workers. Get this. This is the name of it. doitwithoutdues.com. doitwithoutdues.com. Animated characters and workers holding their thumbs up assure that Bessemer workers that the company already has them covered with good pay and benefits, lies, and that if they pay dues alleged to be $500 without any indication of a time period, more lies, it won't be easy to be as helpful and social with one another. It then tells workers that they can ask for their cards back and that they should reclaim their voices. Much of the information is wrong, misleading, or silly, but providing facts is not the goal. Getting workers to vote no is the point. Workers alone should decide. But why do employers get to have a say in which workers should be in a union? Unions are organizations of workers. They alone should decide. In no other arena does the entity being organized against get to decide who can be in the group fighting them. If you buy a used car that is a lemon and discover the dealer has done the same thing to others, you can create a group to protest the dealer's practices without the dealer getting to say who can join. In sports, a team does not get a voice in deciding their opponent's roster or strategy. The Democrats don't get to decide the candidates of the Republicans or vice versa. Who invited the bosses in? Senator Robert Taft, Representative Fred Hartley, and all the Republicans, and some Democrats who voted with them in 1947. So we are basically being held hostage by some dudes in the Republican Party, or the dudes in the Republican Party, and some of the dudes in the Democratic parties in 1947. I mean, I'm 47 years old. I was born in 1973. My parents weren't even born yet. When Congress passed the Wagner Act in 1935, that was a year before my grandmother was born. Just to put this into context, she died 10 years ago at the age of 70. Well, a little over 70. When Congress passed the Wagner Act in 1935, giving workers the right to unionize, employers believed it was unenforceable and ignored it. A decade later, they had learned otherwise and pushed Congress to pass the Taft-Hartley amendments, seeking to curtail the power of unions and to bring the boss into the process. So thanks a lot, Republicans. You really, really know how to do right by employees. No, they know how to do right by the bosses, not the employees. The employees can go off. They don't care. As long as they show up to work and don't complain. That's really what bosses want. They want you to show up to work, not say anything except yes, sir, no, sir, please, sir, thank you, sir, things like that. By the early 1970s, when I was born, the union avoidance industry had become a big business. Lawyers and consultants have since spent decades finding even more weaknesses in NLRB laws and procedures, effectively thwarting the desires of workers to unionize. A 2019 report from the Economic Policy Institute estimated that employers spend $340 million a year on union avoidance consultants. $340 million a year that could go to the working poor. that could go to these employees to give them better benefits, to give them vacation, to give them time off, to limit their working hours to 8 a day or less. In 2018, 48% of non-union workers said they would join a union if they could. Yet just 10.8% of workers belong to a union today. 48% of non-union workers want to be in a union. This is a large number. That's 2018. Imagine what it is now in 2020 or 2021, I'm sorry. Between those two numbers is the union avoidance industry doing the bidding of the bosses. Employers often argue that they are simply exercising free speech. No. But their role in the process is far more pervasive and destructive than simply giving their point of view during a union organizing campaign. By having an official role in NLRB representation procedures, employers gain influence over every step of the process. With far greater resources and constant access to workers on the job, employers are able to defeat unionization efforts much of the time. Board statistics show that unions win about 50% of elections administered by the NLRB. But these statistics don't include petitions that are withdrawn because a union can no longer win after a prolonged period of endless vote no messaging or after a decision finding only a vastly different unit to be appropriate. Nor is free speech a meaningful concept here. Workers do not have the freedom to not listen to management's endless bombardment of anti-union speech and veiled threats during the workday. Unions and pro-union workers do not have the same free speech rights as the employer. The union cannot enter the workplace and talk to workers, cannot call meetings on company time to talk about the benefits of forming a union, cannot be present at captive audience meetings to counter employer falsehoods, and cannot intervene in one-on-one conversations where supervisors share their personal anti-union messages with workers. Unions also can't have leaders of the anti-union campaign transferred out of their departments or fired on trumped-up charges. Tactics management deploys against union supporters to crush all too many organizing drives. There is a lot of talk about labor law reform. It is necessary and long overdue. Keys to reforming this country's broken labor relations system is curtailing the role of employers in the unionization process. Unions belong to workers. If the bosses have something to say, they can say it at the bargaining table. And this little article was republished from Labor Notes. Well, is there anything else you guys would like to talk about? I can tell you a little bit about who I am. My name is Emberlea McCulligh, and I live in California right now, but we are going to be relocating next summer to another state where I will continue with my uploading live or doing live videos. I am, like I said, 47 years old. I live in California. I am disabled. I have stage 4 metastatic breast cancer. I have a 25-year-old son who is a chef. I have a wonderful, lovely puppy named Patrick Aiden, who is currently sleeping on the floor over here next to my desk. I have been a worker for a long time. I am a member of several unions, the Freelance Workers Union, which is what workers used to be called, and independent contractors used to be called, were freelancers. There are no freelancers anymore. That term has gone passé, I suppose. I worked for years as a freelancer. I also have a background in administrative work. I am a literacy volunteer. I have volunteered on political campaigns. Now I'm not so much interested in electoral politics that much. However, I do believe that we must vote out the millionaires from Congress. We need to vote millionaires out of Congress. They have no place in Congress. They have no place in the House of Representatives, especially the House of Representatives. We need more people like Cori Bush. Cori Bush. This is the name you will hear me talk about quite a bit. And also, part of our segment, we're going to read working class history. And we're going to read today's working class history. Today is March 10th. I think. Yes, March 10th. What happened on March 10th? Okay. On March 10th, 1906, the Westmoreland County coal strike began in Pennsylvania when 15,000 coal miners, mostly Slovak migrants, walked out. They shut down 65 mines for over a year until police violence, which killed 16 and hardship, finally forced them to give in. Oh, I'm sorry. That was actually on yesterday's. My bad. I thought it was today's. March 10th, 1906. The Catastrophe des Courrières occurred in France, the worst mining disaster of the 20th century, with 1,060 workers killed in a coal dust explosion. 45,000 miners suddenly went on strike for 45 days against horrific working conditions. The government brought in the army to crush that strike. March 10th, 1952. Fulgencio Batista led a coup in Cuba and appointed himself president. Backed by the U.S. business and the wealthy elite, his government killed thousands in anti-communist purges. He was overthrown by the 1959 revolution. Senator John F. Kennedy later described his rule in a speech. Fulgencio Batista murdered 20,000 Cubans in 7 years, a greater proportion of the Cuban population than the proportion of Americans who died in both world wars, and he turned democratic Cuba into a complete police state, destroying every individual liberty. Yet our aid to his regime and the ineptness of our policies enabled Batista to invoke the name of the United States in support of his reign of terror. Administration spokesmen publicly praised Batista, hailed him as a staunch ally and a good friend at a time when Batista was murdering thousands, destroying the last vestiges of freedom, and stealing hundreds of millions of dollars from the Cuban people, and we failed to press for free elections. And I think we all know what happened after the Cuban people got tired of Bautista. Who came in and rescued the Cubans? Could it be Fidel Castro and Che Guevara? And as part of this live stream each week, I'm not sure if I'm going to do it weekly or daily right now. I think I should do daily. So I'm a daily show at 1:00 every day. Hopefully we won't have any more setbacks, and I will get a little bit more familiar with using this technology so we won't have any more setbacks. Until tomorrow then, and I'll bring up we'll have some other stuff to talk about tomorrow. Okay. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. I hope that you have a wonderful day. And if you get the chance to unionize at your workplace, unionize your workplace. Do it for you. Do it for everyone that you love. Do it for your colleagues. Do it for the future. Do it for our children. Do it for the future. The future is socialist. Thank you so much. Until next time.